Next, from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, we speak one-on-one with the director, Marc Miller. Director Miller tells us about his department's management of Illinois natural resources and how his department is focusing limited resources to maintain the state's parks and recreational areas. This runs about 30 minutes. Marc Miller, Director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, thank you for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Well, thanks for having me on again, Terry. Thank you very much.
Obviously, as we meet now, it's a little bit different than it was when we first met. You had just taken over. And one of the, I think, real successes you had early on was the governor, Governor Quinn, reversing the decision that Governor Blagojevich had in reopening a number of the state parks and historic sites that Governor Blagojevich had closed down. The state has been undergoing, as everyone knows, continuing to have tough fiscal times. The national economy, of course, is down. So we wanted to revisit and just get an idea, first of all, where we are on our natural resources and the management of our state parks and recreational areas. Let's start off there. First of all, where would you, if you gave us kind of a state of the state version of where we are in your department, give us an assessment of where we stand?
Well, the state of the agency is that we're very strong and that we're working to deal with the fundamentals and to deal with our budget as it has been given to us by the legislature. We have been working through a number of issues that we were handed when we assumed power back in 2009, and have been working through those things to make this agency stronger and better and worthy of the appropriations that the General Assembly gives us. And I'm very proud of a lot of that work that we've done, and we've done a number of things on programming and initiatives as well.
Just to give the viewers an idea, how large is your budget?
Well, it's well over, it's $200 million plus, and we take in money from general revenue, which is usually the area that we fight for the most. We have other state funds, which are licenses and fees gathered from users who utilize some aspect of our natural resources or recreational component, and then federal funds as well, which come in from basically the Fish and Wildlife Service for fish and wildlife conservation.
And those fees, I mean, just so people, you know, fishing licenses, hunting licenses, that kind of thing, I guess. Maybe paying to camp at a state park ground.
That's exactly right. We have camping fees, of course, that goes in our state parks fund. Fish and wildlife fees go into a fish and wildlife fund and are protected by federal and state law from being diverted for any other purpose. And it's been a battle that we also undertook. On my very first day on the job, Governor Quinn signed a bill which reverted money that was swept by Blagojevich that was not legal under federal and state law, and that money belongs to sportsmen and women. And we protect that money very carefully and use it for what it's intended for.
You also have a foundation that I'm not sure, does that money come from just people donating to?
Absolutely, private donations. It is a 501c3, a tax-exempt organization that is connected loosely with the agency. It helps fill in the gaps for us here and to do programming that we wouldn't otherwise do. One of the victories of the last 2 years is that we have acquired, was donated to us, a 750-acre property up in Rockford, which is called the Tortson Youth Family Education Center. And we're working on youth programming with that foundation to provide opportunities for youth to be outdoors.
I was actually going to get into education a little bit later down the road, but let's go ahead and do it now, because what I wanted to ask you, why don't you give us the umbrella first? What do you see the mission of your agency?
Well, it's to manage, enhance, and protect natural and cultural resources. And we have a very broad mission, and most people generally think, Terry, about our agency as being fishing, camping, hunting, and that's it. But there's a much broader element to our agency than that. We have water resources, law enforcement, the Illinois State Museums are also under us. We have realty and environmental planning. One fact that is interesting with our regulatory programs with water and with and with our realty and environmental planning folks, is that we review roughly 21,000 economic development projects every year and sign off on them. So we have an economic component here as well. We also protect $44 million worth of property from water and flooding. And so we have a very important function there. And we came into play during the floods of April and May. We have all of those things in addition to the traditionally thought of parts of our agency, the state parks, 324 sites, and our fishing and hunting conservation component.
And I was going to say, there's a variety of things that seemed to me when I was looking at the mission. One is as you say, the hunting and fishing, but it's also part of it is tourism. People coming in from outside the state maybe to go camping or to use lake facilities or whatever they may do. And then some environmental stewardship. And as we touched on, let's go back to that, education. You know, one of the interesting things, there's an organization in Chicago that takes inner city kids and takes them up to Wisconsin, actually, to a camp. And one of the touching things that I heard someone comment on when they asked the kids what they thought, they said, you know, they didn't remember ever seeing as many stars before. And we maybe who live closer to some of the outdoors forget that many times there's people in the urban areas that may be far removed from some of the natural resources.
Absolutely.
When you were talking about the farm that had been donated, let's talk about that. What education goes on there, and to what extent do you look to expand the education of what we have in the state parks and wildlife and natural habitat and all that to children outside of the Rockford area?
Well, one of the very important directives from Governor Quinn is to leave no child inside. He believes very firmly in that, and I do too. We want to make sure that our children are getting outdoor experiences and living healthy lifestyles. And this is part of the educational component there with the Towards the Sun Center. We have a very broad amount of programming already. We've been working with partners, some of them from inner city Chicago, like the Eden's Place Nature Center, Fishing Buddies program, getting children out to that location for weekend camping trips. We're hoping to develop more opportunities there for fishing. We need to work on that. There are opportunities for their first exposure to hunting, but certainly having them have an experience in a safe setting that gives them opportunity to see stars. And we've had very, very positive remarks and feedback from allowing and fostering that. And one thing that I would say is that another perception of our agency is that it is a downstate agency. We represent the entire state, and we also need to make sure that we focus on the children who are going to be our future conservationists, who are just so happen to be growing up in the urban or suburban areas. So we need to have programming there. And one of the things that I did upon becoming director is to hire a youth program coordinator to focus on youth activities, but also I created an office of community outreach that would help us reach out to communities that haven't typically been served. And that could lead us into a conversation about our budget. When you see the state changing, becoming more urban, we have to tailor our programs so that everyone benefits, and then there would be support in those areas as well. So we have to do that in order to justify the funding that we receive from the state taxpayers.
So when you have an urban area like, let's take Cook County as an example, of course. Do you coordinate your efforts at all? They have the forest preserve up there, which is kind of amazing to me because it's not that far outside Chicago on the north side that all of a sudden you feel like you're in the woods of the Northwest or something.
70,000 acres in Cook County just for the forest preserve system. It's a tremendous planning and testament to the vision 100 years ago of what Chicago should look like, and it's something that everyone up there should be very proud of, and it's right there. Also, this is one of the issues that we have to deal with. The forest preserve system is so robust, we don't have that much property up there. The only property we have in Cook County itself is William Powers State Park, which is on the Indiana state line right at the very tip on Lake Michigan. It's a wonderful, very well used, and the community greatly appreciates and very actively involved in that state park. But we don't have much of a footprint in the city, which makes our programming very difficult. And as a result, we do everything we can to partner with groups, organizations up there so that we can go along with them and help with their mission, our mutual mission of providing outdoor experiences, recreation, or doing some kind of conservation work. So working with Forest Preserve, the Chicago Park District, those are all things that we do on a routine basis.
So let's go back one hand to the budget. You know, people, when Governor Blagojevich closed down the parks, there was a hue and cry, and understandably so. A lot of times people might, the viewers, the citizens might go, if I'd known you were that desperate, I would have, you know, helped out. The parks, the hunting, the fishing, the outdoors is one of the areas we say of state government that, you know, you probably have the most popular agency, I would say, in many ways, because you're the part of state government that people enjoy.
Providing positive experiences.
Yeah, it is. It's a positive experience, whether it's, you know, boating or whatever, family activities that, as we mentioned already. How are you doing? And given the state's finances, are you better off or worse off than you were a year ago?
I would think that the agency is in a very precarious position, as we continue to move further on down a timeline, we're getting closer and closer to a situation that we want to try to avoid. So just to answer your question directly, we're worse off this year than we were last year. We took a nearly $8 million cut in general revenue. It was much less than what the governor introduced in his budget. And as a result, we have to manage our funds very carefully and still yet to provide the services that the citizens expect for us, our clientele or our customers expect from us. Keep in mind that you know, roughly 50 million, 40+% of our revenues are coming in from fees and licenses that are paid for by Illinois citizens. And we manage those dollars very carefully and have done a very good job of getting our ship righted in terms of the administration since taking over. But what we've done over the last 10 years of cuts, it's been 10 years, as it's just been within the last couple, we have taken the general funds cuts, the money we would receive from general funds, and shift that over to our other state funds, boating, state parks, parks and conservation, etc. And shifted our operations, our maintenance of what we do over to those other state funds. We have now reached a critical point where we are in deficit spending on those funds, and the fund balances are going to approach zero and go into the red either at the end of this fiscal year or in the beginning of fiscal year 13. And so we are trying to manage the situation so where we can continue to do what we do and do it best for the public. But we are going to have to examine very closely what it is that we do, what our mission is, and provide some guidance as to what we're going to be doing in the future unless we get in a situation where we can have revenues. If you look around the other states in the Midwest, Arkansas and Missouri, Minnesota, they all have dedicated funding of some sort or another to fund conservation. Missouri is a classic example of having a dedicated funding source through a sales tax. I think that's a non-starter here in Illinois, at least at the moment, but it's something that our constituents have always eyed for decades as a way to have an agency that is self-sustained, does not receive taxpayer dollars directly through through general revenue and through appropriations, and can plan for the future. There are great programs that they're doing in Missouri because they know what's coming in, they expect it, and they can plan for it, and they also do a very good job of showing the voters what they do with that money, because every 10 years they go back and have it voted on again. Now that system won't work in this particular point in time for Illinois, but we do need to go back and visit with one of our core principles in conservation, which is that users pay for conservation. It's the North American model in conservation. It's been around since the days of Teddy Roosevelt. But we need to examine that and see what users can do to help support conservation and recreation and the economic impact that we have as being one of the largest landowners in the state of Illinois. So I think that there's an answer there, and we are reaching a point where this could be considered a crisis. We're trying to manage it so that it doesn't happen, but we are going to need help. And I think that for the most part our constituents understand. Certainly the sportsmen and sportswomen who already for 75 plus years have been giving us funding for conservation. They understand that user pays principle, and we need to find ways to create sustainable revenues for this agency so we can continue to do its work.
You know, I was going to say, to put it in some context, there are any number of stores that we're all familiar with that sell camping equipment, hunting equipment, etc. So there is quite a lot of business that is transacted where individuals will go out, not to mention the fishing tackle and all that. You know, I mean, millions of dollars that are designed for that. So it would be quite a shame and a hardship on business to that end if a number of those facilities were closed down. Or the parks are different.
Absolutely. And just a few figures about what we contribute to the state's economy. Hunting, fishing, and wildlife watching is a $3.2 billion economic impact. That's enough to support 33,000 jobs in Illinois. Our state parks, they provide roughly $1 billion worth of economic impact every year. And we have nearly 45 million visits to our state facilities. So you know, just that portion alone is significant for the state's economy, and it's something that we need to continue to fund so that those localized economies can continue to receive that kind of support and influx of dollars from people who visit parks and go fishing and hunting.
Let's talk politically. Where is the governor? You know, as we tape this earlier today, the governor announced that he was laying off 1,900 state employees, not with your agency, but others who are dealing in the area of mental health. He was closing 7 facilities. And he said, in so many words, to the lawmakers, you can't complain about me closing down the facilities if you don't provide the money for us to operate. Will he be making a similar announcement on state parks and going back to have to undo what he did, which is to open state parks?
Well, and this is part of the challenge here, is that we do have this shortfall of money, and that essentially time has run out. But we're trying to find ways so that we can keep that promise, because the governor is very strong on making sure that these places are there for people to enjoy and to recreate in. And in times of great economic need, recession like we're in and coming out of, people need to have those places to enjoy and to do it cheaply, and that's where they go. And so I think there's a great deal of resistance to revisit that. But on the other hand, you know, with the funding that we have and the situation, the reality is that we're going to have to find a solution. I'm hoping that we can take the time that we have now and communicate to people that we are in dire straits and that we need help, and that we'll be able to find a way politically to come out of this without getting to that point.
Also politically, have you you go through the budgetary process, you testify before the various committees that would be handling your budget. What kind of response are you getting from lawmakers when you talk to them and you tell them about the needs of the Department of Natural Resources?
Well, we have undertaken an effort to re-educate and reintroduce this agency to the appropriators, the legislators, and to the general public. And we call it a rebranding effort. The effort really is to show what I've stated earlier, which is we have a broad economic impact on the state of Illinois. We are relevant and important. We're working to make sure that everyone understands what we do and has access to participate in our programming. And as a result of that, we've had very positive feedback from legislators who, under a previous administration, didn't hear much about DNR and assumed that it was a very small, narrowly interested agency. And the feedback's been very positive. The work that we've done administratively to hold costs down and to participate in the budgeting process, the budgeting for outcomes process, which is a new budget way of thinking, a new process. We are being lauded as one of the best examples, if not the best example, of budgeting for outcomes. We've been used as an example for our cost-cutting measures and holding things down. So what we're trying to do is show and prove that we are very good managers of the dollars we're given, and that has been very well received. I think that when you look statewide at the agencies that received a percentage of cuts, DNR was one of the agencies that received the fewest percentage of cuts, at roughly 5%. Now, the problem is that 5% at this particular point in time is almost catastrophic to us because we have been putting so much pressure on these other state funds and drawing them down. So we really needed to have that shift of getting a little bit more general revenue dollars. The reality is, though, is that even with all of that work and telling our story and proving that we do things very well, we are not likely to see more dollars. And so we have to find another solution, or we might be the subject of a future announcement by an official looking at ways to manage this situation.
Well, let's look at it in every way. Not all state parks are created equal, so to speak. I mean, they're not all equally visited or utilized.
That's true.
I won't ask you to identify which ones you would close, but do you have a doomsday scenario that you've gone through and say, if we had to shutter some, you're planning for that, or has it not gotten to that point?
It hasn't reached that point. There's also a number of mitigating factors here that complicate things greatly. In addition to looking at the visitation, I mean, some of our parks receive 2 million visitors a year. It takes a great deal of resources. But we also have federal funds that and sportsmen's dollars that have gone into certain aspects of a park, and because of the federal nexus, we are not able to close those portions and close off those facilities. So, for instance, under the previous administration, they closed Illini State Park on the Illinois River. There were federal dollars tied into the boat ramp, and after they closed the facility, they had to go back in and open up the road just enough for them to have public access for the boat launch. That's because federal dollars, sportsmen's dollars, went into that, and they were required to keep that open. Because of how we manage this agency and how we utilize and leverage as much federal money as possible, it's going to be very hard for us to move through that process without tripping some federal nexus or federal requirement to keep things open. So it's going to be very difficult to do that, and I think that it won't be as clear-cut and easy as just lopping off a few at the end. We're going to have to take a very careful look, and it's going to take time.
You know, some of Illinois has had some new developments, or at least new relative to the last decade or so. One of them that I think has been, as I understand it, a pretty good success. It's down in Sparta, at the And what is the actual title? I don't want to misspeak.
It's the World Shooting and Recreational Complex in Sparta, and it was built in the 2002 timeframe, 2004, and it is home to a very large event called the American Trap Shooting Association's Grand American Tournament. The impact from that facility annually for that event and for other events, we're booked more than 240 plus days a year, is roughly $25 to $30 million. So our investment in
Just that one park.
that one park.
And I was going to say, and use it as an example, because I've heard that it was the biggest campground.
East of the Mississippi.
Is that right?
There's 1,000 campsites there, with many of them with electrical hookups. And when you go down there for the Grand American, almost every single one of those campsites is occupied by an RV or a trailer.
So when we talk about state parks, as we are here, it's not just Illinoisans going camping in their backyard. In that one example, you're going to get people who love to shoot, it might be skeet shooting, whatever, coming in from around, certainly, well, the country, but certainly around the Midwest, and bringing a lot of dollars in. And these parks, whether it's there in Sparta or Ren Lake Resort and the Ren Lake area and others across, I know happen to be, in many cases, economic engines for that area of the state.
And it's absolutely true, and that's the part of the issue that we have, is that we need to make sure that the public understands just how much we provide for a local community like that. I said earlier, $1 billion of economic impact from our state park visits every year, nearly 45 million visitors. It's a tremendous thing to have those people going through a town, buying gas, buying lunch, buying picnic or whatever materials at the store, in addition to fishing equipment and other things. It is tremendous, and we need to have that in the state of Illinois. Roughly, all of our activities, we have enough economic impact in the state to affect $32 billion. That's the economic impact for all of our activities in the state. That's more than 90,000 jobs. And we need to make sure that this continues, and that we continue to provide those services, not only for the altruistic, wonderful aspects of being outdoors and enjoying our natural resources and the beauty that's around us in the state, but also just from the economic impact of providing jobs.
When going back to the state lawmakers, when you talk to them about these issues, is it falling on deaf ears, or are you getting, what kind of reception are you getting among the lawmakers?
There's an understanding, and some of them might be thinking about our agency in a new way, but there certainly is an understanding. The professionalism that we have here in this agency, the work that we're doing to manage dollars effectively and to hold ourselves accountable to that, and also the economic impact. It's opening up a lot of eyes, but a lot of the lawmakers already understood that that's what we have. And we're helping them articulate those things. So we've been making great progress in that front, and I'm very proud of our people for doing that.
We don't have a whole lot of time left, but relative to your employees in your agency, those who work out in the parks and manage the different facilities, do you have enough people currently? How are you staffed? Are you spread thin? Can you afford to cut people or not?
Woefully thin. We need more conservation police officers to patrol and to make sure that people are following the law. We have an enormous public safety component there. Our state parks, and we just mentioned one, Illinois Beach State Park, over 2 million visitors a year. We used to have 28 people managing this park. We're down to 5.
Wow.
They're doing tremendous work. There are things that we're
Are you
doing.
burning people out on there?
We are. And we are. And I think that one of my greatest fears is that much of our workforce is nearing the age of retirement. We could lose up to 725 by 2015.
And there goes a lot of experience,
a lot of
obviously.
experience, how we do things, and how a certain park runs. That is a very scary thing for us to think about. We have people doing 3 and 4 jobs, and we're also deferring maintenance. We're deferring things that need to be done to protect our natural resources, invasive species control on our state parks. All of those things are putting aside so we can focus on the things that are relevant. And the part of the issue is the good and the bad. One is that our people are so dedicated and love their jobs so much that they're doing everything they can to make sure that the public doesn't notice what is missing. But on the other hand, the public doesn't know what is missing, and we've been going on along here without really addressing the need for more funds. And so that's where we're at.
I want to squeeze in a little bit more because you touched on environmental, and I was going to say one of the interesting, we look out at the Great Lakes. If one goes out to Chicago, look out at Lake Michigan. A few years ago, we were at the Shedd Aquarium, and actually, I'm sorry, the Field Museum, and they have a fellow there who is the fish guy. And they actually have fish that have been collected 100 years ago, and they got them in jars, and it's like a baseline of DNA and research. And he held a fish in his hand, and he said, this fish 5 years ago wasn't in Lake Michigan, and now it's the most plentiful fish out there. We've heard about the zebra mussels. We're hearing about the Asian carp. A lot of people look at your agency, again, just in terms of recreation. To what extent are you involved in these environmental issues, such as the Asian carp or zebra mussels? And to what extent is that a key component of your agency's mission?
Well, it certainly is a key component. We're on the front lines for fighting Asian carp and keeping them out of the Great Lakes. And our agency has been recognized for its natural resources management, statewide and region-wide, as adequately handling this. Our people are doing a great job, and so we're manning the barricades and keeping the fish out. But we also are working on policies and working through the invasive species issues on a number of different fronts. The next thing we're going to worry about is black carp. That is a carp that eats mussels, mollusks. And mussels are one of the most endangered animals in the state in terms of species diversity, etc. And that's going to be something that will have an impact on the ecology. You take out these small pieces like a mollusk or a plant, and you can have an impact on the greater ecosystem and how it works. And the Great Lakes is a great example of having invasives come in from the other direction. The round gobies, the zebra mussels, the quagga mussels are the next thing, or milfoil is a plant. And you're going to completely alter the system. And species composition changes, and the things that we're used to doing, recreating or commercial fishing, that ceases to be. And so that's one of the stories that I think we can tell, is that when you see and track these things, you'll be able to notice what impact economic and in terms of our quality of life and the quality of our environment. And we're still doing that work. And I would say that if we continue to have the funding issues we have, we're not going to be able to do as much of that work as we need to. And we need to be able to focus on those things in order to provide science-based decisions for our future.
Well, Marc Miller, there's always more than enough things that we could talk about, and always a lack of time to go into every aspect, but maybe we can come back and talk with you again. We appreciate your time visiting with us today.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to another opportunity to talk.
Thanks so much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.